I don't know about y'all, but I'm super excited. For those of you who have not yet had the pleasure of meeting, my name is David Johns. I'm the executive director of the National Black Justice Coalition. NBJC is the only civil rights organization working in the United States at the intersections of racial equity and LGBTQIA plus equality. I'm joined by my good friend Baldwin, and we will welcome a few of our friends, brilliant and talented, beautiful and amazing creatives, to help us have a conversation today. This conversation is being provided by mitu as well as the Conciencia collection. The collection is an organization of 35 leaders, Latinx, brown folks who are creatives and executives within the music industry. And they banded together after the world watched what happened both to George Floyd and Anderson Arboleda, individuals who were killed and murdered simply because of who they are and how they show up in the world. And what many of us know is that in addition to Black and Brown or Black and Latinx people existing and showing up in spite of the challenges that we face, there are also some of us who are Black and Brown or Black and Latinx who also are members of the LGBTQIA plus community. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about what those letters mean. We'll spend a lot of time dreaming about what's required for us to be free. And again, I want to invite in some friends of mine to help us talk about this conversation. Before I invite them in, I want to say a little bit more about why it is important that we have this conversation today. It is important that people acknowledge that in this moment in particular, this moment is connected to a much larger movement, a movement that is centering people who are often neglected and ignored, centering the needs of communities that are often overlooked. And in particular, every one of us should recognize and celebrate that often it is Black and Brown queer, Black and Brown trans, and Black and Brown or Latinx non-binary folks who are on the front line, sacrificing so that we change policy and practice that benefits so many other people who already have privileges that they take for granted. And that one day might mean that those of us who are Black and Brown and queer and trans and non-binary who live in the United States and in Brazil and through other parts of Latin America and the rest of the world can show up as we are without apologizing, shrinking, or hiding. But we know that there's still a whole lot of work to be done. While some of our countries, including the US and Brazil, are passing laws to make discrimination not permissible, it's just not enough. And so I want to tap in a few of my friends, my new friends, I hope I can call them friends, to help us have this conversation. They are, in no particular order, Pabllo, Vittar, who many of you know is one of Brazil's biggest drag queens, activists, singer-songwriters, and cross-cultural icons. Pabllo is a 25-year-young Latin Grammy nominee, an MTV EMA award winner, a next generation leader according to Time magazine, and this Bob is everything. So thank you for joining us, Pabllo.
Thank you.
Of course. Also joining us is Urias, who is a model and a entertainer, who is gaining enormous following from her fellow LGBTQIA plus community members. And of course, it is not hard to see why. For those who don't know, Urias is known for her uncompromising, grungy, cyber-futuristic aesthetic, as well as her husky and hypnotic voice, and showing up and showing out any place wherever she exists. It's also worth noting that Urias got her start in her foothold tearing up runways. And so we'll have a chance to talk about connections to fashion and beauty and the opportunity for advocacy and action so that we can all be free. Of course, thank you for being here with us.
I appreciate it.
Of course, I also want to welcome Tatiana, who is, among other things, a musician and a fashion designer. I believe she's joining us from Chicago. I'm eager to talk about, from Philly, LA. The Chicago connection is I know you're doing some fundraising for a community space in Chicago around Black and Brown, Latinx and queer safe spaces. And so I look forward to talking to you about that. And last but certainly not least, joining us is Lauren Michelle, who is a singer, a songwriter, a former member of one of my favorite girl groups, Fifth Harmony. And she began experimenting with different sounds and is still tearing stuff up in so many different ways. And so I encourage all of you, if you're not already ready, to follow them all, to support them, download their music, and to buy the wares of those that are designing fashion. And so join me in welcoming all of them, no matter where you are. Please give them a loud round of applause. And so what I want to do is to start a conversation that will invite each of you to introduce yourselves, introduce your pronoun, and to introduce how it is that you identify. And I say that because I want to acknowledge that as a community, we are all building, we are all learning, and we are all sharing. And in particular, on today, we're centering and celebrating and supporting that in spite of the fact that we often have conversations both in the US and around the world that simply reduce us to black and white, we know that that's not true, that there are Afro-Latinx people, there have been Afro-Caribbean people, and there are all other kinds of ways in which we show up in our beautiful diversity. And so I want to invite each of our panelists to introduce themselves and the way in which they want us to respect and respond to them. We'll start with you, Pabllo.
Hi, love. Hi, everybody. Bueno, tengo que confesar, no hablo muchísimo bien español, no hablo muchísimo bien inglés, pero voy a hacer mi Spanglish. Yo estoy aquí en Brasil, en esta cuarentena, en esta pandemia. No me importo, soy una persona gay. Yo hago que gender fluid is future, gender fluid is beautiful. Estoy aquí hoy. Thanks for having me. Gracias.
Of course, love that. Lauren, and you, how would you introduce yourself and want us to respond and respect you?
Yeah, well, my name is Jauregui, Lauren Michelle. I like that you kind of introduced me as Michelle. I'm kind of like, I'm in the same space of fluidity currently at the moment. But I go by she, her pronouns. I'm pretty open to whatever, though I honor and respect the fact that we're all just energy. And yeah. And what was the other question? I'm in Miami right now. I don't know if that's...
Perfect. Yes, that's what I want to know.
I identify, like, I keep kind of going back and forth between this because originally identified as bisexual and then kind of swerved into like pansexuality when I learned that there's kind of like a whole nother universe out there that I'm attracted to just souls, you know? So now I just think queer is it. Like, I'm queer. Like,
understood.
That's it.
As the umbrella, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
And I also appreciate you naming both the B in the acronym and the P in the acronym, because sometimes they get erased, right? And we spend too much time talking mostly about what it means to be gay or lesbian. We don't spend as much time, but we spend time when we talk about murder with our trans sisters, but we don't talk at all or often enough about what it means for people to be bi or pansexual or just be attracted to people, which is what most people are, right?
It's that fluidity, is that queerness. I think that's where I identify as just like, I fall in love with souls. I'm attracted to souls, and
I love it. We are all souls. We are all energy. Let's tap in, Tatiana, into this conversation. I want to welcome you in. How should we respect and respond to you? How do you identify, Tatiana?
Yeah, I go by she, her pronouns, and same as Lauren, actually, just fluid. I don't like to label anything personally, so yeah.
I love that. And want to again remind people as we're learning that fluid it should be celebrated, right? We should not be afraid of what it means to be fluid, especially if we acknowledge that people have taught us intentionally that we should not be fluid because it benefits them politically and they can profit from our pain. So let's bring in Urias. So we have our full house. How do you identify, Urias? And what's important for us to know as we have a conversation and learn from you?
I identify as a heterosexual trans woman, and I think that's it, I guess.
Okay, I appreciate it. Heterosexual. So again, I want to take time and not assume that people know what all of this means. Heterosexual people are the opposite of homosexual people, and that's usually what we talk about when we talk about gay or straight, right? And we also want to highlight that cis is the opposite of trans. Too often people take for granted and think that I was born a woman or I was born a man. No, you were born and a doctor assigned a gender to you, right? And so we have an opportunity to help educate people who may not otherwise think about this stuff, or they take their privileged identities for granted. And so thank you all for helping me to do that introduction and to get us started. I want to ask you this question first, because often when we have conversations about Afro-Latinx, queer people, trans people, bi people, it's negative. We talk about the challenges we face. We talk about the difficulties that exist in our lives because of multiple marginalized identities. What's the best thing about being beautiful and talented and brilliant and serving as role models for Afro Latinx young people who might not have had examples like each of you a decade ago. Why don't we start at the end and then we'll work our way backwards? Urias, what's the best thing about being you and being a role model today?
I guess the best thing, yes, the thing that I totally agree with the thing that you say, that we don't show the beautiful part of it. People always want to show the suffering, always want to show the work part, but I guess we're full of culture. So, and we have this surviving skills, you know, as Black and brown and even LGBT community. We have this surviving skills that we can survive in an environment that's not made for us, you know. So it makes us strong. It makes us full of diversity. We accept more different people around us. I guess that's it. That's the thing that we can learn from.
I love that. Thank you. Let's keep it going. Tatiana, what's the best thing about being you right now?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I guess it's just the fact that I've always had so many role models for music, and none of them ever had my background or, you know, a lot of the things that make me up. So just kind of paving that path for myself and knowing that it's not about me. It's like all the people who also identify the way that I do. So that's great.
I love that. Mi gente, village work. And you, Lauren?
Well, first I want to clarify that I don't identify as Afro-Latinx. I know that I'm white. I just want to make that clear.
Yeah.
So yeah, but as far as like representation goes, yeah, I definitely I feel like more people grew up seeing people who look like me. So I will acknowledge that privilege. And I did see people who were like me, but then at the same time, when it comes to like my queerness and kind of that fluidity, and I think even more so my like openness to have these conversations publicly and to like hold myself accountable and be like a real person. Like, I feel like that's something that I never really saw in celebrity culture or in artist culture, except for like my old like inspirations as far as like artists go, you know what I mean? Like there's of course I've been inspired by a lot of different people who just are themselves, and I think that's where kind of like I drew inspiration from. So I hope to inspire more people to just be themselves, like through and through, you know?
I do. I love that. I celebrate you being real, and I also applaud you acknowledging, naming your privilege and highlighting intersectionality, which is an acknowledgement that there's a part of your identity that you can draw strength and power from. And at the same time, there's another equally important part of your identity that in some ways is oppressed because we still have more work to do to hold other people accountable for holding themselves accountable. So I love that. Got it, received. Pablo, same question to you. What's the best thing about being you and having this bob and showing up and being fabulous?
Para mí, la mejor cosa de ser queer es ser quien tú eres. Desde chiquita siempre fui muy eléctrica, siempre fui yo misma. Yo tengo que agradecer muchísimo a mi mamá, dona Verónica, por siempre me dejar muchísimo libre para hacer, para cantar, para bailar, ser yo, todo lo que yo soy. Yo sé que no es la verdad de todas las familias en el Brasil, pero estoy aquí hoy para intentar empezar a mudar la cabeza de los pais de la comunidad LGBTQ.
Yeah. I think the importance of being able to laugh and dance and experience joy is especially important when we think about this global pandemic that we're responding to, right? On top of all of the other challenges that we face. Now it's incredibly important for those of us who face these challenges, even outside of a global pandemic, to have sources of joy. So I celebrate and I receive that. I want to stay in this place and ask each of you, and I won't call on you. You can just feel free to jump in as you see fit, unless the tech folks tell me that that's not going to work. Why is it necessary for us to talk about the diversity that exists in our community? In particular, what contributions do we make, Afro-Latinx folks, Afro-Latinx queer folks, Afro-Latinx bi folks, non-binary folks? What are the things that people miss when they usually talk about the music industry or the creative industry or people of color? Does that question make sense?
Yeah. I think that oftentimes like people get grouped together, and like colorism is definitely an issue of like, I don't know, it's not just like, oh, you're gay, so you're accepted by the entire gay community. It's like there's still like colorism within that community, and same with Latinx. It's not just like Latinx is like, you know, also have our own problems, but there's still colorism within that community.
Lots of colorism. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah.
Keep going. Say more, Lauren. You, double tap on the colorism point and what's often missed.
Yeah, I feel like as far as representation goes, currently, when we think of Latinx, especially from an American standpoint, what's been marketed to us as Latinx culture, it's very white, point blank, period. And there's a lot of nuance to being Latinx. First of all, it's not just a monolith of a culture. There are multiple cultures throughout South America, throughout Central America, throughout the Caribbean, that express themselves in very different ways and very nuanced ways. And I feel like that conversation misses the mark a lot, because a lot of people think Latino music or Latinx music is just like reggaeton, you know? I've definitely experienced that from the music industry side, of people thinking that Latinx identity is a monolith and or a trend that can be exploited. Definitely experienced that. So yeah, I think that that's kind of something that misses the mark a lot in this industry and in the creative industries, is that we highlight white voices. We still live from a very white privileged, white supremacist perspective all around. And it's like, what's marketable and what's considered like, you know, spicy or whatever, you know, spicy white, you know, like we consume that with kind of like a disregard for the fact that all white Latinx humans are inspired by the tradition of indigenous communities and African communities and their influence on our cultures. So yeah, I think more Afro Latinx people need to be highlighted and uplifted in more commercial spaces. I think that that's like where we start. Yep.
And not the spicy white stereotype. I got that. I like that.
You feel me?
Yep. I like that. Yep.
And and just to say that the conversation, this kind of conversation is important. So we can get rid of the stereotypes. You know, like Lauren said, there's a stereotype of Latin people and what Latin music is. So this kind of diversity conversation shows a lot of points. Like me and Pabllo are in the Latino community, but here in Brazil, we don't have a Latino community. Everybody here is Latino, you know. So it's not like in the US, you know. So we don't get together as Latino, we get together as people of color, and we get together as LGBT community, but not as Latino community. And these stereotypes is also sticking here. We search for white music, we search for white culture. The white culture is taught in our schools. So we kind of, you know, leave a white culture and white supremacist thing. But now we can see that highlighting our voices and showing that to outsiders that we are very plural, you know, we are a lot of things. I'm not just a trans girl, you know. I'm not just a woman, I'm not just a black woman, you know, it's part of my identity, you know, and people has to know that are plenty of identities there, you know, and that's why I think this conversation is very important.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I hear you. I hear a lot of my sisters here say, trans is one of the languages I speak, but I'm fluent in so many different things. Right. And that being a way for us to think about how often we marginalize identities in that regard. So I like that. I receive that. Pabllo, similarly, let's stay in that space. Help us understand more how this conversation happens in Brazil, where, again, it is a Latin space already. It is an inclusive space in that regard. And so maybe help us to appreciate the distinctions or the ways that people might conflate what it means to be a drag queen and what it means to be a trans girl.
Para mí es muy importante esta conversa porque en la comunidad LGBTQ en Brasil, muchas veces las personas gays nos esquecemos que en la sigla tenemos travestis, tenemos transgenders girls, tenemos black people, yes, tenemos muchísimas otras personas que tienen que ser tus voces olvidadas y muchas veces personas de propia la comunidad acaban esqueciendo, forgot de those peoples. Estamos aquí para mostrar que estas personas también tienen voz y que estas personas empezaron lo movimiento y que tenemos que gritar todos juntos. Black Trans Lives Matter, yes. Don't forget, girls, don't forget. Estamos aquí para gritar y para empezar otro movimiento. Estamos en una década que no podemos más esperar, tenemos que gritar, tenemos que nos mostrar que esta voz seja ouvida en todo el globo.
See, yes, Black Lives Matter, all Black Lives Matter, Brown Lives Matter, and all Brown Lives Matter too. So we can do a long one and say all Black and Brown Lives Matter, which is incredibly important for us to underscore. Before we continue to talk about that, I want to acknowledge your point, Pabllo, about there being so many forgotten voices. And the need for us to advocate for those who no longer can advocate for themselves. And it's not lost on me that the organization, Conciencia and mitu partnered with each other after a day of hell for so many communities, right? As I understand it, it was on the same day that George Floyd was murdered, that Anderson Arboleda, right, an Afro-Latino from Colombia, was shot by the cops on the same day. And neither Anthony nor George are here. And there have been so many trans folks who have been murdered in the United States since, right? I want to offer some numbers just for context, and then I want us to have the difficult part of this conversation. And again, I want to acknowledge that in both the United States and in Brazil, there are laws that are being passed that are supposed to make us feel safer and make our lives better. But there was a need for those laws. And even the passage of those laws doesn't address the problems that they were supposed to respond to. And so based on Trans Respect versus Transphobia Worldwide report, we know that there were nearly 3,000 murders of trans and gender diverse people between 2008 and 2018. And while there's not yet new data, what we know anecdotally in the United States is that hate crimes have increased since the person that has occupied the Oval Office has occupied the Oval Office. I'm not going to say his name because my president is still Barack Hussein Obama, but I will say that things have gotten worse for us since that man has assumed office. We also know that it is the case today that data is not always reported in ways that reveal the truth about Black, Indigenous, brown, queer, trans, and non-binary communities, both in the US and in Brazil. But we know specifically, and undocumented, yes, I appreciate that. Undocumented people are often erased completely for that reason.
Completely from data.
Thank you for that reason, right? And so we know based on data that has been reported again, and it is underreported for the reasons that we just described, there were more than 1,238 trans murders during the same period in Brazil alone. And I don't have the comparable statistic, but I know that to date in the United States, there have been more than 30 murders of trans and non-binary people. And again, these are the people that we know of. These are people whose families, when they are no longer able to use their voice, celebrate them, identify as members of our community, and also does not account for people who were misgendered, who were not supported by the police, and so many other things. And so I want to invite each of you to talk about why this current movement to celebrate and honor the humanity of Black and Brown lives, and for me, Black and Brown queer and trans and non-binary lives is important. I really want to understand, and I'll say this again, Pabllo, I know I'm speaking quickly because I'm passionate in this moment, but I really want to invite you, if you have experienced discrimination or violence as a result of police or state-sanctioned actors, to share that maybe as we help people understand and raise their consciousness, but really want us to talk about what Black Lives Matter means to each of you in this moment now. Why don't we start with Lauren, and then we'll end with Pabllo so I can repeat the question again.
Okay, so just so I'm clear on the question.
Two questions. One is, if you want to,
Yeah.
if you have any personal experience or maybe even anecdotal experience that you want to share, because I imagine that there are some people who are like, I heard about this, I saw what happened to George, but I don't know what the big deal is, right? And it might be the same thing, which is like, what does this all mean to you? You're super busy. Like, y'all are bosses. Why was it important for you to be here to have this conversation tonight?
y se siente
Well, I think
esta conversa.
across the board, I feel like Black trans lives are the most Black trans women's lives are probably some of the most persecuted, if not the most persecuted, like population that exists on the planet right now, and they exist across culture. You know what I mean? And I think that that's something that, you know, I think we focus on kind of America, and I think right now we're talking kind of more like in the Latinx world as well, which is kind of just like a blanket statement for everywhere, you know, south of America. So it's kind of like having these conversations and centering these voices is the most important piece of our liberation, because when the most persecuted of us is free and their needs are met, and we listen to their stories, and we choose empathy when we absorb their stories and listen to, you know, their experiences, to heal that and to get to a point where they're free would mean all of our freedom. Because none of us are free until all of us are free. And so when you think of uplifting these voices, uplifting the artists in these spaces, uplifting, you know, and that's the thing, is that intersectionality is going to be the only way that we actually move towards a space of progress. You know what I mean? There's no way that we're going to get there if we don't include the nuance of our existence and protect the nuance of our existence as humanity. You know what I mean? And I think, you know, the narrative is centered in the United States right now because there's, you know, obvious uprising. But that uprising has been happening globally. Trans women have been being murdered for years upon years upon years. This is nothing new. This is probably one of the first times in history where we're actually listening to their voices and centering their voices and making it and doing things like this and having these kinds of conversations publicly in public forums, because it's, you know, while it's a very scary time, being that, you know, this man is in charge of the quote unquote free world, and of course influences ripple effect when you have an army everywhere. So, you know, there's like, this has been happening. Police brutality has been happening because police are state-sanctioned violence, you know, against Black bodies has been happening, against Indigenous people has been happening, against queer people has been happening, you know, until very recently it was illegal to be queer, you know what I mean? Like, we think recent is last week because we have this like instantaneous mindset at this point with all the freaking technology and apps that we have. But, you know, when you think back 50 years, 80 years ago, people still didn't even have the right to vote. We still have voter suppression happening right now. You know what I mean? And so when we talk about this freedom that we all want to see and that we all really want to embody, being where we're from, wherever we're from, you know, I think everyone's goal is to live a free life. And when we say free, we're asking for basics. We're asking to not murder people because of how they identify, and I think it's like the hatred stems from lack of understanding and lack of knowledge and lack of education. It stems from ignorance. And I think that Trump and this man in the White House is a symptom of the deep-rooted ignorance that is a result of colonialism across the board globally. Because you have people who invaded Indigenous lands, stole Indigenous people and displaced them and enslaved them, right? And a whole functioning thing of genocide on top of that. And you pretty much wipe out anyone who dissents, right? And who doesn't agree with what's happening, the machine of colonialism. So you erase history. You erase existence. So now it's like, oh, wow, this is crazy. You know, people are coming out as like all kinds of, you know, the gender binary and all. These are Indigenous practices. These are Indigenous beliefs. Yeah. They've been around. Two-Spirit has been around. You know what I mean? Like we co-opt these things to be woke, you know, but we have, like, that's the main thing I think is when we talk about protecting Black trans women's lives, that is the root of the depth of like if we don't heal that, if we don't see their humanity, if we don't empathize with their humanity, we will never reach a point of freedom. Because
that's it. That's the clip. We can get this whole conversation now. That's it. You didn't shut it down.
I mean, there's so much. It's so much like nuance, and I feel like it's always been like points. We all talk about these points as separate issues and isolated issues, and that's why I say intersectionality is where we're gonna find our freedom. When we understand that the empathy that we need to embody for each other is the first and foremost part of healing this dissonant white supremacist diaspora that we all live in. You know.
And that the empathy and the love is important. Look, that was beautiful. Por favor, di un poco de español.
Sí, ¿quieres que lo diga en español? Ok, bueno. Se lo voy a decir en español, te voy a dar lo que dije. Ok, bueno. Mejor dicho, nuestras hermanas negras, trans, ellos son los más persecuted. No sé cómo decir eso.
Persecución?
Somebody help me out. Persecuted? Anybody? Going once, going twice. ¿Atacadas? No?
Sí.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, estoy nerviosa. Esto me pasa cuando estoy nerviosa, cuando hay presión, pero aquí vamos. Ok, so, básicamente estamos viviendo en la diáspora del colonismo, ok? Y estamos en un nivel en donde para curar lo que ha pasado y el estado en que estamos desde ahora, en lo que estamos viendo, en lo que está este movimiento que estamos viendo, esto no es nuevo. Como que todos estos pensamientos y estas conversaciones de LGBTQ y entendiendo la existencia de trans, de individuales que son trans, es algo que ha existido desde cuándo, porque es una práctica indígena, o no práctica indígena, pero un belief. Coño. Se me va la palabra, pero tú me entiendes, ¿ok?
Pensamiento.
Pensamiento, ahí. Ok, un pensamiento indígena. Así que entender esas culturas o entender que todos estamos viviendo en las heridas del colonismo y que la empatía que tenemos que tener para nuestras hermanas trans es donde empieza a curar, es donde empezamos a curar el problema de la intolerancia, de no tener... I'm sorry, oh my God, no me estoy explicando bien. Okay.
No, es perfecto.
Es donde empezamos, creencia, gracias Loren, pero es donde empezamos a curar, es el entender que ellos son en su humanidad, validar su humanidad, proteger a ellas, proteger a lo que no entendemos o intentar entender en vez de juzgar. Es importante es importante entender eso para que podamos avanzar el pensamiento, la creencia de nosotros para evolucionar, to evolve past white supremacy. That's how I'm going to finish that. Oh my God. I'm sorry, y'all. I have not touched my politics in Spanish, clearly.
Spanglish is perfect. We talk about intersectionality, we going to make it work.
No, disculpa.
Muy bien. And we're giving each other grace. And I want to affirm a comment that came up while you were talking, and that it was beautiful, it was poignant, and it was clear, and everybody received it with the grace that you delivered it. Tatiana, I want to tap you in as well and invite you. Actually, let's do it this way. You are helping to raise money for a center in Chicago. You're fundraising for Brave, correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it, Brave Space Alliance to create a space for Black and brown, trans and queer people in Chicago.
Yes.
Of all of the things that you could do, right? Again, acknowledging hyper talented, you're doing a lot in a bunch of different industries. Why was that important to you? And how does that connect to this global conversation of Black and brown lives matter?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like with this movement, everybody's kind of trying to figure out ways that they can help, right? And there's like all these petitions to sign and organizations to donate to. And when I was thinking of personally like a way that I can donate, I think it's best to start locally. So even though I'm in LA, I still feel a heavy connection to my hometown, Chicago. So I did some research and found the Brave Space Alliance, which it like breaks down exactly like how much money they're raising and like where they're spending it. And it's great. They're building like offices and also permanent housing for LGBTQ communities, for Black and Brown specifically, in the south and west sides of Chicago, because currently the only ones that exist in Chicago are in areas that might not be safe for the LGBT community. So I just think it's great for everybody to kind of do their research and see how you can really help within a community, because I think that's where it makes the most of an impact. There was a second question, I believe.
How does all of that, you kind of answered it, but how does it connect to this broader conversation around the Black Lives Matter movement, which in some ways has been hyper-focused on divesting from police and state-sanctioned violence? Just what are the connections there for you? And then Pabllo, I'm going to come to you next.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important when we talk about, racism and homophobia and any discrimination to know that it's not just a social construct, but a systemic one to battle. So, we have a lot of people that are opening their minds and becoming educated and thinking of ways that they can change what they're doing to help. And that's great, but it's also a system, even if we all agree Black trans lives matter. And then it's like, but if you're Black and trans, it's like, are you really feeling more safe in this moment than before? So it's like, what changes will actually help people to just exist freely? So it's just battling, like becoming aware of the system. And I'm really familiar with the US, but I know it's globally. So becoming aware of that and knowing how to make changes, again, like I said, starting locally and then using your platform if you have one also.
Yep, I appreciate that. I want to tap in. I want to stay in this space, so please keep Tatiana on the screen as I make this point. But just want to flag for Pabllo that I really want to know, how are people having this conversation in Brazil? How are people talking about Black Lives Matter in Brazil? And what do we need to know that is too often missed or not discussed by the media or by those in power? And Pabllo, while you're thinking about that question, Tatiana, I want to honor and celebrate that you are leveraging your power and the privilege that you have access to for good. And so for anyone who's wondering what they can do after listening to this, after digging into the resources that we're going to share toward the end of the program, you too can think about a fundraiser for an organization or cause that will support and create safe space for Black and Brown, trans, binary, and queer folks. And so I want to thank you for that example, Tatiana, and then ask you, Pabllo, what are we missing and how are people having this conversation in Brazil?
En Brasil tenemos muchísimos protestos. Sabemos que en Brasil los gobiernos es un gobierno que tampa sus ojos para que lo que está aconteciendo con las personas, pero te han dejado muchísima gente triste. Yo acuerdo muy triste porque acuerdo con los jornales sabiendo que muchísima gente está muriendo con la violencia de la policía. Los gobiernos no hacen nada. La media poco lo muestra lo que está pasando con las personas. Como mis amigas hablaron un poco ahora, tenemos que mostrar las voces de estas personas y mostrar qué están aconteciendo. Yo siempre procuro usar mi plataforma para mostrar lo que está pasando en mi país, lo que está pasando en las ciudades con el movimiento Black Lives Matter. Quería muchísimo que la media en Brasil también mostrase, escancarase para el mundo que en el Brasil también se sufre muchísimo racismo, homofobia, tantas otras cosas más.
I'm asking myself in this moment how different the experience of acknowledging that the government closes their eyes and doesn't do much to protect us from police is dissimilar. It feels quite the same. I want to tap in Urias and also ask you to color this picture as well. Will you also help us to understand what the media isn't doing because they're not demonstrating or not talking about how Brazil is suffering? In particular, can you help us understand what it's like for our trans siblings in Brazil What does Black Lives Matter mean there and to you, and what are we missing or what do we need to know?
I was thinking about, was watching you guys have a conversation, and I was thinking about how things are here. Things here are very devastating, I would say, for trans community. We've been surviving since the beginning of things. So I guess I would disagree with Lauren in one thing, that when she said that the hate and these things came from ignorance and from people not knowing. Like, I am tired of not being known. You know, we've been around since ever. So, and the government here in Brazil still treat us like we don't exist. We don't have medical assistance for our transitions. We don't have the basis. We get kicked out of our houses because our parents don't understand our gender, and then we have to live on the streets and provide money with it. So we're kind of, as a Black trans girl, saying to you, in my country, I'm kind of invisible. It's just like that.
I love that. I want to stay in this space, and I want to tap in Lauren again, because I heard Lauren actually, you both agree. There was no disagreement. And in particular, Lauren said...
Yeah. I think she was just mentioning that point.
About Native people. So make the connection. Go for it. Yeah. I just want to tap you in.
Yeah, I think Urias totally felt me. I think that they were just I think she's just mentioning the fact that she's tired. She's tired of it. Of course, we gotta know.
And that people can't use the excuse anymore that we don't know, right?
Yeah, we don't know you, girl. Yeah. You know me.
Especially y'all, especially all of y'all doing the damn thing. And so with that, what more do we do? What are we demanding of people? I really love that each of you are also still showing grace. Even you guys, I heard you say, I'm tired of it, but I'm also still holding space for people. Yeah. What do we want people to do? And maybe this might be an appropriate point for each of you to talk about your quotes individually. And so let's do that. Let's go one by one, and we will pull up your quotes as we do that. Que podemos demandar a la gente? What are you asking of that's what are we demanding? So let's back into it. Let's back up. Tatiana, I'm going to pull up your quote. Let us know what you were thinking when you shared this quote, and what do you want people to do so that the vision that's reflected in your quote is realized soon?
Yeah. Okay, I'll go ahead and read it, and then I'll so as a non-Black Latina, it is important for me to address the racism that exists within our own community. We must stand together against our oppressors and unite not only because of a common enemy, but for the love of other human beings. We must fight to protect all Black lives and uplift the Black voices that often go unheard.
I appreciate that.
Oh, yeah, second part. As non-Black people, we have non-Black people have some level of privilege, and we need to use it to bring attention to issues of police brutality and inequality within this country and globally. Many of us come from immigrant families who came to this country in pursuit of a better life, and many of us have obtained that life. Now we must fight for others to have the opportunity for a better life as well. All lives can't matter until Black lives matter.
So let's stay here, and I want your last line around not all of us have a better life. What do we need to do so that, and this is the point Lauren made, making me think about Fannie Lou Hamer, who said, none of us are free unless and until all of us are free.
That is Fannie.
What do we need to do to make that real?
I mean, there's so much, because it all starts with policies, government policies, and things that are ingrained in communities and stuff. But I think just using the powers that you do have, I don't think we have a perfect system of voting and everything, but we do have that power. So actually being very informed and making an informed decision, and put people in power who have the best intentions for humanity. But oftentimes even politicians it's kind of the better of two evils. So that kind of sucks too. But really just trying to change the system completely. So I'm not personally sure how to do that, but I think everyone together we can figure it out,
I love it. The first step that you articulated is to reflect upon it. And similarly to acknowledge what privilege you have and then to think about what you can do as a result. And you are a living example of that. I appreciate that. Pabllo, I don't want you to read the quote, but what were you thinking when you shared it? And what do you want people to do so that all of our lives matter?
Yes, my quote habla muchísimo sobre las personas de la comunidad, específicamente las personas de la comunidad LGBTQ, empezar a estudiar quién fue las personas que empezaron este movimiento, y muchas de esas personas son Black, trans. Comenzar a estudar y saber que tenemos muchísimo a que agradecer a estas personas, porque si hoy soy una persona cantante drag queen en uno de los países que más matan LGBTQs in the world, es porque muchísima gente teve su vida sacada, teve su vida destrozada por no ser respetada y por no estar de acuerdo con las normas.
We do. We all have to thank them. We all have to learn them so that we can thank them. I spent a lot of time, especially in the US, especially during June, reminding people that there would be no Pride Month or celebration if it were not for not only Marsha P. Johnson, a Black trans woman, but Sylvia Rivera, a Latinx trans woman who existed even when the terms trans didn't exist and the things people said about them was not as cute. We would not be here if it was not for them and for each of you. And so I appreciate you, Pabllo, for reminding us to say their name and to honor them as we continue to do this work. Urias, same thing to you. What were you thinking when you shared your quote? And what do you want us to do so that you don't have to be sick and tired of being tired anymore?
When I shared my quote, I wanted to get you, how can I say this? I want you, Black community, get to know that there are Black trans people, you know, because sometimes we're not allowed to be part of this community. And I want you, the LGBT community, to know there are trans members and there are Black members of this community, you know, because sometimes we feel so erased in our own, you know, environment, and it should be embracing. And sometimes it's not, you know, like, especially here in Brazil. That's what I want to be included. I want to be, you know, it's my space, actually. We created it, you know, we made it.
Yes.
So I'm not getting. So just like, I want to be included in that. Not just me. I want to see trans people on television. I want to walk by on daylight and see trans girls walking by and having regular jobs and having another job than prostitution. You know, that's what I want to see. You know,
and we deserve it. I got both chills and I want to cry at the same time, acknowledging that all of that is deserved, if only for the reasons that Pabllo mentioned. We started this shit. Like, you all started this shit, and it's not lost on me. Like, that's dope that you can be the biggest drag performer and a badass trans performer and singer and person in a country where we still are not safe and celebrated. And I want all of you, and I especially want both of you, to continue to be safe as you continue to do the work of making space, not only for us to say the names of those who come before us, but so that our babies who are trying to figure out how they want to show up in the world can also show up and be safe as well. Thank you both for that. Thank you all for that. Lauren, tell us about your quote and what you were thinking when you shared it and what you want us to do so that all of our lives matter too.
Yeah, well, I think I just kind of, same as Tatiana, was kind of acknowledging that as a non-Black Latinx person, we all have to really, as a community, I feel like we really need to acknowledge the racism that is just very alive and well within our own community. You know, it is deeply embedded into the social consciousness. I just, like, without even thinking about it, it's just, and again, I think I kind of focus constantly on historical context, because I feel like that's the most important link that we need to remember in all of this. Like, all of these symptoms are not arbitrary. Like, like the erasure of Afro-Latinx people is on purpose. The erasure of Black people in general is genocide. It's active genocide that is still ongoing. And it's across the globe, because across the globe, indigenous cultures have been decimated, and just tortured and just completely trivialized, you know what I mean? And just taken, and just given a bunch of limitations. And so I think it's just so important for us to acknowledge that when we fight, when we talk about being a part of this fight, you should never just want to get involved with justice for your own self-interest. You know what I mean? You shouldn't have to wait until your rights are also taken away to care about the fact that someone else is sharing space with you, coexisting with you in the same realm, and doesn't experience the same freedom you do. And it's not up for debate. It's an actual lived experience that we just need to listen to and uplift and acknowledge. And I think, yeah, like Urias was talking about, like just they made the space. Like we need to make the space. We need to acknowledge, uplift, and center these voices so that we can heal.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the conversation literally between you and Urias in this moment, and your quotes in the acknowledgement of the ability to overcome the erasure by recognizing the truth for what it is, right? Like we aren't making this shit up or saying that like we just got here. We're telling everybody that we need to acknowledge the history that has allowed for all of us to get here in this place and time. And
exactly.
So go, please.
Sorry, and also I just wanted to like highlight as the part of the quote of like, Latinx cultures across the board are built off of the backbone of African and indigenous cultures. Like Latinx culture is not, it's represented by a lot of white presenting, you know, folks, but, or excuse me, white folks, but it's not, yeah, sorry. it is, but that doesn't mean that that's where it comes from. You know what I mean? Or that is like the extent of the representation or the depth of where it comes from, you know? So I think, again, uplifting those voices and centering them in these conversations is the most important part.
No, super important. I appreciate that. And please don't ever apologize, especially for interrupting someone with male privilege. All here for it. I want to remind everyone that you can find the quotes, and hopefully we'll take a screenshot of them and share them as I have on my Instagram. I'm at Mr. David Johns. We'll be continuing this conversation, hopefully with some of you after this. But you can find this week's quotes and even previous quotes from previous chats on Conciencia Collection's Instagram page, as well as We Are mitu's Instagram account. So please find them, engage with them, share them, and dissect them, because each of them are packed with information and things for us to digest. We could do an entire hour-long conversation on each of those. So here's my next question that I want to ask, and I want to start by asking Urias and Tatiana to respond. It's, what are some tangible actions that we can take, Mi Gente can take, the village can take as community to support our trans siblings? And I want to ask Urias and Tatiana to respond, because both of you also show up in the fashion industry, right? And I'm conscious of the fact that we're having a conversation and each of you are in entertainment, but they're related industries that have similar problems and also offer other opportunities. And it's not lost on me that all of the things that we've been talking about, a dominance of white folks, European standards of beauty, the erasure of so many of us who are Afro, Latinx, and trans and non-binary and queer, also happens in fashion. And so I want the two of you to talk first, and then we'll open it up to the full group. Urias, why don't you start, please?
All right. I don't know about how things are in the US, but here fashion in Brazil never thought about the trans body. You know, they're never ready for the backstage is very toxic. I don't know about my other girls that go to runway here. And I think, you know, part of making it better, it's making us feel included, you know, making us feel we're belong. This is place. Sometimes we have to fight, even to ourselves, to our thoughts, like, do I belong here? Do I deserve to be here? You know, these thoughts are put in our minds. And fashion standards and fashion cliches are always happening, and then again. I have to break that cycle for me, you know. That's what I think.
I appreciate that. Tatiana, and your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about representation, and now I think it's gotten better, but it's representation within models, and brands use cool, we're going to use a trans model or a Black model, but the behind the scenes is all still very white, the corporate part, the part that actually profits and benefits, and so it's both the representation and also the inclusion of people in the creative process as well. So yeah, it's definitely a lot of work that needs to be done in every industry, but fashion is definitely one of those.
I appreciate that. Representation matters. Words also matter. And so I want to ensure that everyone hears me say Conciencia collective. I want to get it right. I've been rushing and I don't know if I've said it right the whole time, but I want to honor the people for whom that it represents their brand and their work. It is the Conciencia collection. With that, collective. See, try to get it right and then I mess up the latter part. The collection. Y'all bear with it. It's been a long week. Hopefully y'all know my heart and the spirit in which I'm trying to show up. Laura, why don't we say in that space and what resources are not that resources the next question. What should people do? What's the community response?
Well, I mean, I feel like one of the most important things to do is listen. Listen to the voices, listen to the stories, take the time to research if you don't understand, before you attack and before you belittle and before you choose judgment and nastiness. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, this is being human. You know what I mean? You shouldn't change how you treat somebody based off of how they present. That is reflective of your own character, not the person presenting themselves to you, And I think that there's kind of this misconception that people have that we all gotta, be the same. And we're so used to individualization and being individuals that we don't understand empathy and what that means. And so I think working on your empathy, working on your self-love is also important, working on how you view your own self, because 90% of the time, if you are projecting nastiness onto somebody and making somebody feel excluded or like they don't belong or like they're othered, it's because you feel that way or you've felt that way at some point. So really work on yourselves and work on going out and researching topics and getting to understand stories and perspectives before you have an opinion. Opinions are not just things that you can have. Opinions must be informed.
I think that's right. And very much relevant to that, I also want to highlight for people that the definition of empathy, a noun, it requires action. It's the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. It is something that everyone is capable of if they do the work. Period.
Action is just pity, right?
Say that again, Urias. I want to make sure we all heard you.
Empathy without action is just pity. It's just
period.
Okay.
Punto. That's the quote. Punto. That's it.
Punto. You gotta put an N in there, man.
Look, that's it. That's the quote. It's just pity. That's it. Okay, Pabllo.
I agree 100% con Lauren. It's very important to listen the true stories, these girls, these boys, para traernos la verdad a toda la comunidad, que no esquezan, que no somos apenas GBL, somos todos y tenemos que estar unidos, tenemos que mostrar las voces. Yo en cuanto a una personalidad en Brasil, yo siempre procuro traer las voces de las chicas trans negras para que los otros conozcan los trabajos, para que los otros saiban que existen otras personas que no somos sozinhos. Como Lauren dice, tenemos que escuchar, tenemos que traer a estas personas para nuestro convivio, como Urias habló poco ahora. Queremos ver trans girls en television, queremos ver trans boys en fashion shows, queremos ver las chicas de los boys en todos los lugares, como vemos chicos gays, como vemos chicas bisexuais e lésbicas. Queremos ver todos unidos. Mas para que esto aconteça, tenemos que unirnos todas las manos, nos unir. Esto falta muchísimo, pero yo tengo mucha fe en mi corazón que un día no estaremos aquí conversando sobre tristeza, estaremos conversando sobre cómo estamos empoderadas y cómo mudamos todo esto. Tengo mucha fe.
Punto.
Punto.
Obrigado.
Punto.
Obrigado.
Obrigado.
That's it. Y'all are brilliant. And I taught kindergarten and third grade. I talk often about teaching the babies, and each of you are reminding me of the importance of listening to the babies as well.
Yes.
Listening to be empathetic, listening to learn, listening to remind each of us that we are a community. We are indigenous people, and the lies that white supremacy and oppression and anti-Blackness tell us are all designed to kill us. And the sooner we appreciate that, the better we can all get free in the way that Lauren and Fannie Lou Hamer have described. I want to honor that time is the most precious resource. It is the one thing that we cannot get back. And I know that y'all are all blessed, booked, and busy. And so I want to land this plane. I want to invite each of you, again, knowing that this is a part of the conversation. I hope it is a part of everyone else's process. What resources would you share for people who will digest this, process this, and who might want to do more? Is there a book that you found that was helpful, an organization that you want us to support, a song that helps you to get through when things get difficult? What's the resource that you want to share with people? And again, I want to remind everyone to follow each of these brilliant, beautiful people, to ensure that you're connecting to the Instagram account. You all can share an Instagram account as your resource if you want to, so that we can remain connected and we can continue to build and learn and strengthen this community. Why don't we start just because of where you all on my screen, Tatiana?
Yeah, I think anything book-wise by Bell Hooks or Angela Davis, or even listening to a lot of Angela Davis's like talks and stuff. You can like pull it up on YouTube if you're not into reading. But their views specifically on like feminism and inclusion of you know, all women, Black trans women especially, are really great. So anything by them. And also just want to plug again the Brave Space Alliance. If you're looking for a great organization to donate to, they're doing really great things in their community. So.
I love that. Thank you. Pablo, what resource would you want to share?
Yo tengo aprendido muchísimo sobre las chicas, sobre los boys transexuales en mi país. Tengo muchísima apreciación, muchísimo amor por mi amiga Urias, que siempre desde lo comienzo empezó a hablar para mí sobre los movimientos y sobre todo lo que los gays quisieran por estamos aquí. Pero tengo aprendido muchísimo con una chica que se llama Gabriela Lohan, que es una chica preta travesti que influencia a otras chicas. Acho que todos tenemos que aprender algo, entonces dijo ella.
Gracias. Obrigado. Lauren, what resource would you like to share?
So there's a documentary on Netflix called Disclosure.
Yes, please.
Yes, I think that's a great, starting point for anyone who wants to understand kind of the trans experience a little bit better from trans people's perspective, not, you know, white Hollywood's perspective. I think also my friend Alec Weidmanon, I'm not positive how to pronounce his last name, but goes by Alec. They go by Alec. They go by Alec. Beyond the Gender Binary. Their book is incredible. Their book is so good. And yeah, that's another way to just, I think understanding trans stories is reading trans stories. You know what I mean? I think that's the most important part. And then the BTFA collective, Black Trans Femmes, in the arts. Their collective is really incredible to contribute to as well.
They have a dope Instagram account. They have a powerful emergency fund. They are doing incredible work. I reached out to them today because I got a phone call from a mother whose daughter, a Black trans woman, was arrested at the airport because she was being harassed by ignorant police who were demanding of her to use a name that is inconsistent with her identity and how she shows up in the world. And so she right now is sitting in a jail cell because of ignorance and oppression and white supremacy and transphobia, and particularly for her, trans misogynoir, which is a term created by Maura Bailey. to talk about that unique form of oppression. So I want to lift them up and encourage people who can support them to support them as well. I too, like Pabllo, live for the day and have faith in my heart that one day we won't be invited, especially because so many of us are so talented to talk about the sad things. And I also am hopeful that day will come soon because of each of you, and especially because of you, Urias. And so I ended on you intentionally and want to ask you, what resources do you want to share? What more do you want to say such that our trans siblings are better supported and are no longer invisible in ways that they should have never been?
I was gonna say about disclosure too, but I would encourage our people in our community, even Black or even LGBTQIA plus, to listen to our elders, members of the community, you know, to listen to what they've been through, to what they lived for. You know, the Stonewall, you know, was so close to here. For sure, there are people who lived that time to teach us how to organize ourselves, how to see ourselves through time. You know, we as a trans community, we've always been together. We've always been supporting each other. We've always been, that's how we survive as a community. And I've always listened to elder girls to understand how we are seen in the society we are, and to understand how we can act to change things in our day life, you know. But I think it's it. I think we have to listen to our elder people in our own community, our older LGBT people, older Black people, Black and brown and Latino people, to listen and understand their struggles, so that their struggle won't be our struggle, and the next generation's struggle won't be our struggle too, you know. Same apart. We will have another struggle. This will be past.
Also pose.
Also pose, for sure.
I love pose. Oh my god, that's
it's very important to not voguing trend and these things, but how to understand that we manage to create families so we LGBT people don't starve on streets. That's the main thing here. The houses are real. We made our houses, you know. So that we have to remember that time that we had to come together to pick ourselves from streets, to not starve as a community. I think we as a LGBTQ community forget that, you know, sometimes, you know, we don't see ourselves as brothers and sisters anymore. That's what I mean, you know.
Yeah.
I think we have a lot to change, a lot of change to do. And I think we are doing great change, you know, through the past years. We're doing great change. I'm not saying, no, we're you know, it's effortless, it's useless what we're doing. No, we're doing great. You know, we have to watch to not let the fire get washed away, you know.
Yeah.
Keep burning, bitch. We gotta keep burning.
Listen, Urias. So let me say this. I said collection because Urias keeps dropping gems that I need on a t-shirt. So I need my friends at the Conciencia collective to make a collection of shirts with 2 quotes on them. My first quote is, "Empathy without action is just pity." And I need a teacup on the back. And then I also need "Supporting one another is our only way to survive." That has always been true, and it will continue to be true.
We've done it before, you know. It's not new for us as a community. We've done it before.
I think that's right. And so I want to say, as we acknowledge that, the importance of listening to our elders, of listening to each other, of listening to and learning from history, I hope each of you hear me in my heart when I say thank you. To you, Tatiana, to you, Pabllo, to you, Lauren, to you, Urias. I also want everyone who is behind the scenes with the Conciencia collective, as well as mitu, to hear me say thank you for making this happen. So much of what is required to make all that we've discussed meaningful, measurable, and lasting is policy change, both here in the US, in Brazil, and throughout the world. I want to offer as a resource the National Black Justice Coalition's Gender Justice Toolkit. It has language in it, words to use, words to avoid. It has resources. It has movies that we recommend as well, including polls. There's a powerful documentary called My House that also talks about the experiences of more Black, queer, trans, non-binary folks, and lots of other things that are happening. And so I want to offer that up as a resource. And again, I want to make sure that you all hear me in the spirit of Maya Angelou said, most of y'all are going to forget most of what I've said. Hear me when I say thank you. I also want to encourage everyone who is listening to tune in next week. Next week, there are 4 special guests who will be touching on the topic of race in music and how it affects us. My hope is that they will watch this, they will listen to and learn from each of you and reflect upon the things that you all have said. And again, my hope is that people hear your heart. I'm going to hold on to Lauren's reminder about the power of empathy and the ability for us to learn from our history and to get through as a result of that. I will honor and appreciate the things that Tatiana has said and demonstrated by making investments in community in ways that are meaningful and significant and change lives for people. I will celebrate the many ways that Pabllo shows up and shows the hell out, creating space for us in places that are still told to us that are unsafe, and honor the way that you say the names of our sisters and the ways that all of us should and continue. And Urias, as the torchbearer for so many of our siblings, I will continue to honor and celebrate the many ways that you demand that we give you space that you have earned, that you are not asking for, but you have worked to occupy. And I, again, want to just say thank you, the Black feminist in me, the culture lover, the person who just wants to see people win and who affirms that y'all are beautiful, y'all are brilliant, and y'all are showing the hell out. I just hope that you hear me when I say thank you. I pray that you were safe, that you continue to be selfish and centering yourself in all of this work, and that you continue to lean on each other and consider me and NBJC a resource. I think I'm supposed to say, please stay with us after we wrap this live. Maybe not, that was just a note, but want to encourage everyone who has joined to please continue to join. Please continue to support this movement, this collection, this collective. I use both of those words intentionally. And join us next week. We're going to continue the conversation, the learning, the listening, and the sharing of love. That literally is the only way that all of us can get free. Thank you for spending time with us on tonight.